That's what it's doing to ordinary New Zealanders.
I want to talk today about pigs. And a few pigs. First of all, the pig of the analysis from some of the opposition we've seen on our budget, and also the more important thing, the pigs in Europe, Mr Speaker, and what that might mean for our budget. You see, Mr Speaker, despite the fact that we've come out of the worst recession in my lifetime, and in fact of every member in this House's lifetime, we are still borrowing something in the order of $240 million a week for the foreseeable future. It's about $10 billion in change, Mr Speaker, and that's a lot of money. You see, when I was born, we were quite fortunate. We were actually more wealthy than Australia. Our per capita income was higher than Australia, and New Zealand was a wonderful place to grow up in. But in 35 years, things have gone backwards. But this budget, I'm glad to say, Mr Speaker, over and above the budget we had in 2009, builds on the road to recovery. See, Mr Speaker, we've got the opposition talk long and hard about some of the issues about what we've done with our budget. Well, I want to talk about some of the risks. Because basically over there, all they're going to do is borrow obscene amounts of money that we cannot afford. You see, today, Mr Speaker, Moody's, one of the world's leading credit rating agencies, downgraded Greece to junk bond status. So what? Who cares? Well, what that means, Mr Speaker, is the cost of your borrowing skyrockets. And every 1% of interest rates that your cost of your borrowing goes up, Mr Speaker, costs this country $500 million.
Point of order, Trevor Mallow.
I think it's not usual to bring the Speaker into debate, and especially the Speaker's finances.
The member must be more careful with his pronouns.
So, every 1% increase in interest rates, Mr Speaker, costs this country $500 million. That's another $500 million that my children are going to have to pay back at some stage. So, Mr Speaker, getting our finances under control are absolutely critical. See, Mr Speaker, under page 76 to 84 of the budget, it outlines quite carefully about some of the detailed issues that we have to deal with and some of the risks and scenarios that might arise. For example, Mr Speaker, did you know if economic growth rose 1% higher than we're forecasting, 1% higher, that's an additional $3 billion for us to spend per annum. $3 billion. What would $3 billion do? Waikato Expressway. All sorts of lolly scrambles would arise. So, Mr Speaker, this budget is about maintaining our debt profile and getting our economy to grow faster. Because we believe that the best way to control our expenditure is to put it in the places where it makes sense to do so. Because, Mr Speaker, today we saw Moody's, as I say, make Greece junk bond status. There's a risk of other countries in Europe falling over. We have the situation with Ireland, with Spain, and Portugal, Mr Speaker. And I tell you what, if any of those countries actually fall into the same demise that Greece had, we'll have major riots occurring across the whole of the Eurozone. And, Mr Speaker, that would be a tragedy. Yesterday, Mr Speaker, we had a new Prime Minister elected in Japan. In Japan, they are facing debt levels of 200% of GDP. And at 200% of GDP, he's announced a massive amount of austerity measures because they recognise that their financial position is unsustainable. See, Mr Speaker, this budget is about creating opportunities that were lost under 30-odd years of successive governments who are maybe a bit misguided. And it builds on their recovery. It puts in a position that we will actually have a government surplus, a proper surplus, by 2016. That will allow us to start paying back our debt position and stop actually borrowing more. It's about strengthening our economy and putting in place tax changes that incentivise work, savings, and allow people to do things that they really want to do and to spend their own money in the way they see fit. I want to touch a bit on what the prior Speaker talked about, early childhood education. Mr Speaker, I had the massive fortune of growing up in a neighbourhood that didn't have a kindergarten to choose from. I attended play centre, and I was very happy that my brothers did as well. So, Mr Speaker, we respect choice. We respect the ability of people to choose whether they want to go to a playgroup, a play centre or a kindergarten. And I respect the ability of people to choose. I sent my children to the plain play centre I went to as a child, and I enjoyed it. I had the absolute pleasure that my mother sat on that play centre committee. I went to that play centre committee, and my children went there. And it was a parent-led centre, and it was about choice. Not the same teacher, Mr Hedare. Not the same teacher. She's no longer with us, I'm afraid. Yes. Yeah, well, we have a situation where, at the moment, we have the ability, we have scaremongering from opposition over there of what early childhood changes may be. Well, I can tell you, Mr Speaker, a year or so ago, we had early childhood centres screaming out they couldn't get enough teachers to meet that prior government's view of 100% qualified education. I sat in a meeting with the members of the NZEI for the early child education that said, look, we don't believe in choice. We don't believe in parent-led education. We don't care about the play centre movement, the playgroup movement. All we want is a monopoly on providing education to students. You go and talk to the head of the NZEI who come and talk to me in Christchurch, and you ask them, Mr Speaker. We have the ability, Mr Speaker, to put in place tax cuts that reduce the marginal tax rate of 73% of New Zealanders to 17%. 17%. I can go talk to my brothers and look at them in the eye. One of them's on the minimum wage, and I can turn around and say to him, this is how much better you're off. This is how much you're better off. And they turn around and he says, I don't believe you. So I sit there, and you know what I went, Mr Speaker? I went to the website. The tax website? The tax website. And you know what he did? He didn't believe it. He went to the tax website and he went, this is great. I get a few extra dollars in my back pocket. And you know what he's going to do? He rang up his boss and said, I want to do that extra shift on a Saturday morning. Because that's a few extra dollars he's going to get in his back pocket to get ahead. Allow him to buy his own little car in this instance, but save hopefully for his house, for him as a future wife. Well, maybe an iPad like our great minister down there, Mr Williamson. But see, Mr Speaker, the average tax rate, not just the marginal tax rate, the average tax rate these people are going to pay is about 15%. And you see, if you're out there working and you have 2 kids, you earn about $50,000 a year. And do you know how much tax you're going to pay? Zero, Mr Speaker. Your net tax is going to be zero. And I can tell you, I am proud to stand in front of any community anywhere in New Zealand and say to them how wonderful those people are going to be, put the incentives in place for them to work, Mr Speaker. And who pays for this? Who pays for this great smoke and mirrors that the Labour Party pointed out? Well, it's those big, nasty multinationals, Mr Speaker. Those big, nasty multinationals. The Shells, the BPs, the ANZ banks of the world. And heaven forbid how they should pay some more taxes through the thin cap regime. I'm proud to be part of a government that's putting up taxes on multinationals to give something back to the average New Zealanders. And what a wonderful thing that is. And I cannot believe that the Labour opposition would be against that, Mr Speaker. And where else does the money come from, Mr Speaker? Well, we've taken out a rort that existed between trusts and companies, and we had the ability of a situation where we've recognised that the incentives to stop that actually occurring, Mr Speaker. There were thousands and thousands of trusts setting up all around the country to earn income and funnel it through trusts rather than through individual taxpayers who did not have the ability as workers to be able to do that. And I think it's great that workers will be paying a lower rate of tax, and those people who are using trusts, that unproductive activity through many lawyers and accountants up and down the country, will actually be used in productive purposes. And I think that's the right thing to do, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I want to talk quickly about an example of somebody who I actually came into my office in Christchurch recently, and this person lived in North New Brighton, and a very good example given to me as a result of this, when I actually investigated how much better off this person would be. Well, this person was a university student. They got the student allowance for 40 weeks a year. They flattered and got about $100 a week in rent. They got about $40 a week in an accommodation supplement. And they earned part-time about $9,000 a year throughout the holidays. Mr Speaker, this person was ropeable when they came into my office. They couldn't believe that they had the ability, that GST was going up, everything was going up, they could not afford. Well, I had great news for this person, Mr Speaker. You know what? They were better off by their student allowance going up by $3.92 a week. They were also better off by a tax cut of $4.85 a week. But yes, Mr Speaker, they're going to pay a little bit extra GST, about $5.21. But overall, they were $2.66 a week. Now, that's only a cup of coffee a week. It's only a cup of coffee a week, Mr Speaker, but it's a start. And I'm proud to be part of a government that creates a start and puts in place the right incentives for these people to get ahead and get their skills so they can take on their situation, they work and invest. I'm proud to be part of government that allows working New Zealanders to have the incentives to put in place to operate. That this person is not going to take on more debt. They can reduce their student loan a little bit or spend a little bit more on their own education, Mr Speaker, and I think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's $2.66 to that member over there. $2.66. And if they'd have saved up, got their friends together, you could have come to the meeting in Palmerston North where Craig Foss spoke, and they could have actually saved some of their money, Mr Speaker. But look, I think the ability, Mr Speaker, of some of these people to put together a little bit extra incentives to work a bit harder, like my brother, to have their situation under early childhood where they can have choice and respect parents' choice, I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing, Mr Speaker. We've bent back the debt curve. We're not going to be a pig. We've brought back the situation where our finances will come under control, and we will have the ability, Mr Speaker,